She didn't scream. There was no struggle, no broken furniture, no shattered glass, just silence. The kind of silence that sits in a room and waits for someone to find it. On the morning of October 1st, 1988, in a quiet apartment in the Brainerd community of Chattanooga, Tennessee, a young woman came home and pushed open her roommate's bedroom door. What she found on that floor, she will never forget. Not in 1988, not in 1998, not today, not ever. Her name was Karen Pulley. She was 20 years old. She was a student at Chattanooga State Community College, studying to become a paralegal. She had a future mapped out, a family who loved her deeply, and a faith that carried her through every single day. She never regained consciousness. Police launched one of the most intense manhunts Chattanooga had ever seen. Women were locking their doors twice. Neighborhoods were on edge. Fathers were walking their daughters to their cars. And somewhere, hidden in plain sight, moving freely through the same streets, the same neighborhoods, the same city, the man responsible was living his normal life, waving to his neighbors, kissing his wife goodnight, sitting in a church pew on Sunday morning. He was a United States Army veteran, a devoted husband, a man his community trusted with a smile and a handshake. His name was Harold Wayne Nichols. And by the time the people of Chattanooga finally understood who he truly was, 12 women had already paid the price. One of them with her life. 1988, 1989. Palace for 12 known victims, 41 criminal charges, 37 years on death row or executed. December 11, 2025. But here is what the headlines never told you. Harold Wayne Nichols had already been arrested before Karen Pulley ever went to sleep that night. The system had him in handcuffs. A judge sentenced him, and then they let him walk. 18 months. That's all he served. And the moment he walked out of that prison in Chattanooga, the clock started ticking for 12 women who had no idea he was coming. How does a soldier become a serial predator? How does a devoted husband terrorize an entire city at night and come home to make breakfast in the morning? And what really happened inside that apartment on the night of September 30th, 1988? Stay with me, because this story is not what you think it is. Welcome to Beyond the Crime Scene, where every week we open the files on the cases the world almost forgot and give a voice to the people who deserved so much better. Today, we are diving deep into the true story of United States Army veteran Harold Wayne Nichols, the man Chattanooga, Tennessee called the Red-Headed Stranger. If you are brand new here, welcome. We are so glad you found us. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a case. And before we get into this story, drop a comment below and tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We have viewers from all over the globe, and we absolutely love hearing from every single one of you. All right, let's get into it. Every monster has a beginning. Not every beginning looks like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a little boy, quiet, confused, hurting, a child who didn't choose the life he was handed, but who would one day make choices that destroyed the lives of others. To understand what Harold Wayne Nichols became, you have to understand where Harold Wayne Nichols came from. And that story begins not with a crime scene, but with a birth certificate. December 31st, 1960, Chattanooga, Tennessee, the very last day of the year. While most of the country was counting down to midnight, celebrating, laughing, popping champagne, somewhere in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a child entered the world. His name was Harold Wayne Nichols, born on the final day of the year, as if the calendar itself barely made room for him. From the very beginning, Harold's world was unstable. His parents' relationship fractured early, and when it fell apart completely, Harold and his siblings didn't go to a loving relative, didn't get placed with a warm family friend. They were removed from their home and placed inside a church-affiliated orphanage right there in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, when most people hear the word orphanage, they picture something cold and institutional. But what Harold Wayne Nichols experienced inside that facility was something far worse than indifference. The foster parents who were supposed to care for these children, who were supposed to protect them, nurture them, give them what their own families could not, used extreme physical punishment as a routine part of daily life, not discipline. Punishment, pain used as a tool, fear used as a method of control. Harold Wayne Nichols grew up in a place where hurt was normal, where adults with authority used that authority to inflict pain rather than provide safety. Day after day, week after week, year after year, The lesson Harold was learning wasn't how to read or how to pray or how to be a good person. The lesson he was learning was this: the world is dangerous, people with power use it against you, and pain is just the price of being alive. Now, and this is important, none of that excuses a single thing Harold Wayne Nichols went on to do. Millions of people survive terrible childhoods and never harm another soul. What happened to Harold as a boy does not explain away the crimes, but it does explain the foundation. It tells us what kind of soil this man was grown in, and it matters, because this story only makes full sense if you understand how it started. By the time Harold Wayne Nichols was a teenager, he had spent most of his young life without stability, without safety, and without a single consistent example of what a healthy, loving relationship looked like. He moved through his teenage years in Chattanooga the same way he had moved through childhood, surviving, getting by, keeping his head down. August of 1979. Harold Wayne Nichols walks across the stage at Kirkman Technical High School in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and collects his diploma. On paper, it looks like progress. A milestone, a young man moving forward. But forward toward what? There was no plan, no clear path, no college application, no trade offer, no mentor pointing him in a direction. Harold drifted. He bounced between jobs in Chattanooga, picking up work where he could, losing it just as fast. Nothing stuck, nothing gave him purpose. Nothing made him feel like he was building towards something real. Months passed, then a year, then another. Harold Wayne Nichols was adrift in his own hometown, invisible to the world, unable to find the traction that most young men take for granted. And then, November 1981, Harold Wayne Nichols made a decision that would change the trajectory of his life. He walked into a recruitment office in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and enlisted in the United States Army. Think about what that moment must have felt like for him. A young man who had never known structure, who had grown up without stability, who had spent his entire life feeling like the world had no place for him, suddenly given a uniform, a rank, a bed, 3 meals a day, and a clear set of rules to follow. For the first time in his life, Harold Wayne Nichols had a reason to get up in the morning. For the first time in his life, someone handed him an identity. But here is the truth about broken things. Putting them in a new box doesn't fix them. The Army gave Harold Wayne Nichols a framework. It gave him structure, it gave him purpose on the outside, but it could not reach the thing that was damaged on the inside. And that damaged thing, it was still there, waiting. November 1981. Harold Wayne Nichols ships out to Fort Riley, Kansas, one of the United States Army's most storied military installations, located just outside Junction City in the heart of the Kansas Plains. Life at Fort Riley was regimented, demanding, and disciplined. For a man like Harold, someone who had spent his entire life without walls or routines, the structure should have been healing. And on the surface, it appeared to be working. He served. He showed up. He did what was required of him. But beneath the surface of that military uniform, Harold Wayne Nichols had not changed. The impulses were still there. The disregard for other people's lives, other people's commitments, other people's pain, it was all still there, quiet and coiled, waiting for the right moment. It didn't take long for the first crack to show. While stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas, Harold Wayne Nichols became entangled in an affair with a married woman on the base. Now, on the surface, an affair might seem minor compared to everything else we know about this man. But pay attention to what this tells us about Harold Wayne Nichols. This was not a man who looked at a situation and said, "There are boundaries here that I need to respect." This was a man who looked at a boundary, a marriage, a commitment, another person's life, and decided it simply did not apply to him. This was the first documented moment in Harold Wayne Nichols' adult life where he made a choice that disregarded someone else's boundaries completely. It would not be the last. November 1983. After just 2 years of active service, Harold Wayne Nichols is discharged from the United States Army. He packs his bags, leaves Fort Riley, Kansas behind, and makes his way back home to Chattanooga, Tennessee. On paper, he is a veteran now, a man who served his country, a man who stood up and answered the call, and Chattanooga received him accordingly. Back in his hometown, Harold Wayne Nichols did something that surprised everyone who knew him. He settled down. He got married. He moved into a quiet neighborhood in Chattanooga and began building what looked, from every angle, like a perfectly normal life. His wife adored him. Neighbors described him as warm and friendly. People on his street waved to him in the morning, chatted with him over fences, trusted him without question. He was polite, was present. He was, by every outward measure, a good man living a good life. But there were two Harold Wayne Nichols. There was the Harold who came home to his wife every evening. The Harold who sat across the dinner table and laughed at the right moments. The Harold who showed up to social gatherings and shook hands and made people feel comfortable in his presence. And then there was the other Harold, the one who waited until the house was quiet. The one who slipped out into the dark streets of Chattanooga when everyone around him was asleep. The one whose wife had no idea existed. And in 1984, just 1 year after returning from Fort Riley, that second Harold surfaced in a way that could no longer be hidden. 1984, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Harold Wayne Nichols is arrested for burglary and attempted rape. A court looks at the evidence, hears the case, and hands down a sentence of 5 years in a Tennessee state prison. 5 years for burglary, for attempted rape. Harold Wayne Nichols served 18 months. 18 months. Less than a year and a half. And then the gates opened, and he walked back out onto the streets of Chattanooga, Tennessee, a free man. The justice system had Harold Wayne Nichols in its hands. It looked at what he had done, what he was capable of, who he already was, and it opened the door and let him go. 18 months. That decision would have consequences no judge, no jury, no corrections officer could have imagined. Because the women of Chattanooga, Tennessee were about to pay a price that Harold Wayne Nichols had already proven he was willing to make them pay. And nobody stopped him. July 1988, Chattanooga, Tennessee. 4 years have passed since Harold Wayne Nichols walked out of prison. 4 years during which he returned to his quiet neighborhood, back to his wife, back to his perfectly constructed normal life. 4 years during which the Chattanooga community had no idea what was living among them. And then, July 1988, the night belongs to him. It starts quietly, the way all terrors do. Harold Wayne Nichols begins moving through the Brainerd community of Chattanooga, Tennessee in the late hours of the night, silent, deliberate, methodical. He is not frantic, he is not impulsive. He moves through the darkness of these streets with the calm of a man who has done this before, and who fully intends to do it again. He targets women alone in their homes. He waits until the lights go off. He waits until the street is empty and the neighborhood is asleep, and then he moves. Over the following months, Harold Wayne Nichols carries out a systematic campaign of violence across Chattanooga, Tennessee that will result in 12 known victims, 41 criminal charges, rape, aggravated rape, burglary, assault, and larceny stacked one on top of the other like a tower of horrors. 12 women. 12 separate nights when a woman in Chattanooga went to sleep in what she believed was the safety of her own home, and woke up to find Harold Wayne Nichols had already crossed that threshold. The city began to feel it. Word spread the way word does in communities gripped by fear, quietly at first, then loudly, then everywhere at once. Women were double-locking their doors, checking their windows, calling each other at night just to confirm someone was still there. Husbands were losing sleep. Parents were driving adult daughters home after dark instead of letting them walk. Chattanooga, Tennessee had a predator, and nobody knew who it was. Police were working the cases, pulling reports, connecting patterns. But the red-headed stranger, as he would come to be known, remained a shadow, a description, a fear with no face attached to it yet. And through all of it, through every attack, every crime scene, every terrified victim, Harold Wayne Nichols went home. He sat across from his wife at the breakfast table. He waved to his neighbors. He lived his normal life. He even, according to those who followed this case closely, carried out attacks on the same nights he was celebrating personal milestones with his wife. Evenings that should have meant something, anniversaries, ordinary Wednesday nights, were the cover under which Harold Wayne Nichols left his house and destroyed someone else's sense of safety forever. Then came December 1988. Then came January 1989. And here is where it gets even darker, because by this point, Harold Wayne Nichols had already done the worst thing he would ever do. He had already taken a life. He had already left Karen Pulley bleeding on a bedroom floor in the Brainerd community of Chattanooga, and he still did not stop. In December 1988 and into January 1989, Nichols raped 4 more women across Chattanooga, Tennessee. 4 more victims after a murder. 4 more women whose lives were altered forever by a man who felt no compulsion whatsoever to slow down. By the time law enforcement finally caught up with Harold Wayne Nichols, the total accounting was devastating. 41 criminal charges, 5 convictions for aggravated rape involving 4 separate women, and that is before we even begin to talk about Karen Pulley. 12 women, 12 lives permanently fractured, and 1 life that was simply taken. But we have to go back now. We have to go back before December 1988, before January 1989, before any of the other cases. We have to go back to the night this all truly turned. The night Harold Wayne Nichols crossed a line that no amount of time, no number of appeals, and no final statement from a death chamber could ever uncross. We have to go back to the night of September 30th, 1988. Back to a quiet apartment in the Brainerd community of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Back to a 20-year-old woman who had done nothing wrong. Who had come home that evening, locked her door, said goodnight, and gone to sleep. The way 20-year-olds do, the way all of us do, trusting that the walls of our home mean something. Trusting that a locked door is enough. Her name was Karen Pulley. And what happened to her on that night, what Harold Wayne Nichols took from her family, from her roommates, from everyone who loved her, is the story that Chapter 2 is going to tell. Because Karen Pulley deserves more than a footnote, she deserves the full story. Stay with me. Before we talk about the courtroom, before we talk about the appeals, before we talk about the death chamber, we need to stop. We need to slow down. Because in cases like this one, it is dangerously easy to get caught up in the legal proceedings, the timelines, the technicalities, the decades of back and forth between lawyers and judges and governors, and forget the person at the center of all of it. Not Harold Wayne Nichols, Karen Pulley. So before we go anywhere else, before we talk about a single court date or a single ruling, we are going to talk about her, who she was, what her life looked like, what the world lost on the morning of October 1st, 1988, when that bedroom door swung open and her roommate found her on the floor. Because Karen Pulley was not a case number. She was not a statistic. She was not just a name at the top of a legal document. She was a person. Karen Pulley was 20 years old in the fall of 1988. 20 years old, which means she had been alive for just 2 decades. Just long enough to have figured out who she was, what she wanted, and where she was going. She lived in the Brainerd community of Chattanooga, Tennessee, in an apartment she shared with 2 roommates. It was the kind of living arrangement that young people in their early 20s know well. A little crowded, a little noisy, full of the ordinary rhythms of young adult life, shared groceries, late nights, the comfortable noise of people who trust each other enough to exist in the same space. Karen was enrolled at Chattanooga State Community College. She was studying to become a paralegal. Let that land for a moment, a paralegal. Someone who dedicates their professional life to helping other people navigate the justice system. Someone who sits beside people in the most frightening moments of their lives. People who are confused, overwhelmed, lost inside a legal world they don't understand, and guides them through it. That was what Karen Pulley wanted to do with her life. She wanted to help people find justice. She had faith that ran deep. People who knew her described her as vibrant, genuine, full of personality. Her family did not describe her as a victim. They described her as irreplaceable. There is a difference between those 2 words. And the Pulley family understood that difference clearly. She was not defined by what happened to her. She was defined by who she was before it happened. And who she was someone the world needed more of. On the evening of September 30th, 1988, Karen Pulley came home to her apartment in the Brainerd community of Chattanooga. She was 20 years old. She had classes to prepare for. She had a future ahead of her. She locked her door, the way anyone would, the way all of us do, trusting that the lock means something, trusting that a door is a boundary the world will respect. She went to sleep. She had no idea that Harold Wayne Nichols was outside. At some point, during the late hours of September 30th, 1988, Harold Wayne Nichols approached that apartment building in the Brainerd community of Chattanooga, Tennessee. He did not knock. He did not try the front door. He found a bathroom window, and he forced his way through it. He moved through the apartment in the dark, silent, deliberate. He had done this before. The darkness of someone else's home did not disorient him. He knew what he was there for. He found Karen Pulley's bedroom. He found her sleeping. And then Harold Wayne Nichols picked up a 2x4 piece of wood, and he struck Karen Pulley across the head. The blow did not knock her unconscious immediately. It could not have, because what followed was not quick. Harold Wayne Nichols raped Karen Pulley inside her bedroom while she lay wounded and helpless on her own floor. And then, when it was over, he struck her again. At least 4 more times. 4 more blows to the head of a 20-year-old woman who had done nothing to this man, who had never met this man, who was simply asleep in her own bedroom in the home she shared with 2 roommates in the Brainerd community of Chattanooga, Tennessee. 4 more blows until her skull was crushed, until the brain injuries were so severe, so catastrophic, that there was nothing any doctor or surgeon or prayer would be able to do. Harold Wayne Nichols left Karen Pulley lying in a pool of her own blood on the bedroom floor, and then he walked back out the way he came. The apartment was quiet again. The street outside was quiet. The Brainerd community slept on, unaware that on one of its ordinary streets, a 20-year-old woman was dying alone on a bedroom floor. Morning of October 1st, 1988. One of Karen's roommates came home. She walked through the apartment. She noticed something was wrong. She made her way to Karen's bedroom. She pushed the door open, and what she found in that room, Karen lying motionless on the floor, barely breathing, surrounded by blood, is an image that no person should ever have to carry for the rest of their life. But that roommate has carried it every single day for nearly 4 decades. Karen was rushed to the hospital. Doctors assessed the damage, severe skull fractures, massive, irreversible brain injuries, the kind of trauma that does not leave room for recovery. Karen Pulley never regained consciousness. She never opened her eyes in that hospital room. She never heard the voices of the people who loved her. She never had the chance to describe what happened, to tell her story, to look across a courtroom and face the man who did this to her. She was gone, long before anyone ever said the name Harold Wayne Nichols in connection with her death. She was studying to help people find justice. She never got it herself, not for 37 years. And the man responsible, the man who left her on that floor and walked away, he had been arrested before. He had been convicted before. He had sat in a Tennessee prison for what the justice system decided was an acceptable amount of time, and then he had been released. The system had Harold Wayne Nichols. It had him years before September 30th, 1988. It looked at what he did, what he was, and it opened the door after 18 months and sent him back to the streets of Chattanooga. Karen Pulley paid for that decision with her life. For 3 months after Karen Pulley's death, Harold Wayne Nichols continued moving through Chattanooga, Tennessee, as though nothing had happened. He went home to his wife. He slept in his own bed. He continued attacking other women. In December 1988, in January 1989, as if the murder of a 20-year-old college student in the Brainerd community had not occurred at all. And then, late 1988, East Ridge, Tennessee, Harold Wayne Nichols found himself sitting in a jail cell, not because of Karen Pulley, not because investigators had tracked him down through forensic evidence or a tip or a witness. Harold Wayne Nichols was in custody in East Ridge, Tennessee, on charges completely unrelated to anything he had done to the women of Chattanooga. A Chattanooga detective came to see him. The detective sat down across from Harold Wayne Nichols and began asking questions about Karen Pulley. And Harold Wayne Nichols, without hesitation, without resistance, without a lawyer present to advise him to stay quiet, confessed. Just like that. He was not broken down over hours of interrogation. He was not caught in a corner with irrefutable evidence. He was not presented with DNA results or a witness who could place him at the scene. A detective asked him what happened to Karen Pulley, and Harold Wayne Nichols told him. He wasn't caught through forensic genius or investigative brilliance. He was sitting in a jail cell, waiting for someone to come and ask him the question. And when they finally did, he answered it. What follows that confession is a list of charges so long it reads like a summary of a man's entire criminal soul. 41 criminal counts in total. The rape and murder of Karen Pulley. 5 counts of aggravated rape involving 4 separate women across Chattanooga. Burglary, assault, larceny. 41 counts. 12 known victims. 1 death. May 12, 1990. Hamilton County Courthouse, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Harold Wayne Nichols stood before the court and entered his plea. Guilty. He did not fight it. He did not claim innocence. He did not put Karen Pulley's family through the additional cruelty of a contested trial, where defense attorneys would have picked apart her life, looking for reasons to shift blame. He stood up in that Hamilton County courtroom, and he said he did it. The jury received the case. They deliberated for less than 2 hours. Less than 2 hours to weigh 41 criminal counts. Less than 2 hours to consider everything Harold Wayne Nichols had done to the women of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Less than 2 hours to look at the facts of what happened to Karen Pulley in her bedroom on the night of September 30th, 1988. And return a verdict: death. Harold Wayne Nichols was sentenced to death. On top of that, the court added 60 years for aggravated rape and 15 additional years for first-degree burglary. The numbers were almost irrelevant alongside the death sentence, but they told the full story of what this man had done. Karen Pulley's family sat in that courtroom and heard the word death pronounced. And perhaps, in that moment, they believed the worst was behind them. It was not. The death sentence handed down in Hamilton County, Tennessee in May of 1990 was not the end of this story. Not by a long stretch. What followed was 37 years of legal proceedings, appeals, delays, reversals, near misses, and moments that brought the Pulley family to the edge of closure only to pull it away again at the last second. 37 years during which Harold Wayne Nichols woke up every morning on death row at a Tennessee state prison, ate 3 meals a day, had access to legal counsel, had time to think, to reflect, to write letters, to pray, to speak with a spiritual advisor, to build relationships with other inmates and prison staff. 37 years during which Karen Pulley's family woke up every morning carrying the weight of what happened to her on September 30th, 1988, and had to keep carrying it every single time a new legal document crossed a judge's desk. May 1994, Nashville, Tennessee. The Tennessee Supreme Court takes up the case of State v. Nichols and affirms the death sentence. The ruling stands. The sentence stands. January 1995, Washington, D.C. Harold Wayne Nichols' legal team petitions the United States Supreme Court, asking the highest court in the country to review the case. The Supreme Court declines. It denies certiorari, which is the legal way of saying, we have looked at this and we are not taking it up. The sentence stands. The Pulley family exhaled. Surely now it was only a matter of time. It was not. The appeals continued. Year after year, new arguments, new motions, new legal avenues explored. The machinery of capital punishment in America moves slowly, deliberately slowly, by design, and Harold Wayne Nichols and his legal team used every mechanism available to keep that machinery from reaching its conclusion. Then came 2018. Chattanooga, Tennessee. And this is the moment in this story where things take a turn that almost nobody saw coming. The moment that when Karen Pulley's family heard about it, must have felt like the ground shifting beneath their feet. In 2018, Harold Wayne Nichols' attorneys sat down with District Attorney Neil Pinkston. The district attorney, the man whose office had prosecuted Harold Wayne Nichols, the man whose job it was to represent the people of Chattanooga and the state of Tennessee in this case. And together they reached an agreement. They agreed to resentence Harold Wayne Nichols from death to life in prison. The man who prosecuted him, the DA's office, the legal representatives of the people of Tennessee. They sat down with Nichols' defense team and they agreed. Life in prison, not death. There was a deal. And then Senior Judge Don Ash looked at that deal and rejected it. He rejected it outright. Sent Harold Wayne Nichols right back to death row. One judge, one decision, one stroke of a pen, and the agreement between the prosecution and the defense was erased. The DA wanted him to live. A judge said no, and Karen Pulley's family, who had now been waiting for nearly 30 years, had to keep waiting. June 9, 2022, Nashville, Tennessee. A new execution date had been set. June 9, 2022 was the day Harold Wayne Nichols was scheduled to die. After more than 3 decades on death row, after every appeal and every delay, this was supposed to be the day. Governor Bill Lee canceled it, not because of anything specific to Harold Wayne Nichols, but because questions had been raised about Tennessee's lethal injection procedures. Governor Lee ordered a full independent review of the state's execution protocols, froze all scheduled executions, and sent the process back to the beginning. Karen Pulley's family waited. December 2024, Nashville, Tennessee. After more than 2 years of review, Tennessee approved a new lethal injection protocol. The state had its procedures in order. The legal framework was back in place. March 2025, Nashville, Tennessee. The Tennessee Supreme Court formally set a new execution date for Harold Wayne Nichols. December 11, 2025. May 2025. Harold Wayne Nichols filed a clemency petition with Governor Bill Lee. asking the governor to commute his sentence from death to life in prison. His attorneys made a remarkable argument. An argument that, regardless of how you feel about the death penalty or about Harold Wayne Nichols, personally is worth sitting with for a moment. They pointed out that if Harold Wayne Nichols were executed on December 11th, 2025, he would become the first person put to death in the state of Tennessee after pleading guilty, since the state reinstated the death penalty in 1978. Not the first person executed, the first person executed who had pleaded guilty. Every other person Tennessee had executed since 1978 had maintained a plea of not guilty at some point in their proceedings. Harold Wayne Nichols had stood up in a Hamilton County courtroom in 1990 and said he did it. He had not forced the state to prove it. He had not put Karen Pulley's family through a contested trial. His attorneys argued that this distinction mattered, that there was something different about executing a man who had admitted his guilt, who had not made the state drag every detail of the crime through a public proceeding. Governor Lee did not respond to the clemency petition publicly. The date remained November 2025, County, Tennessee. Even as the December 11th execution date drew closer, Harold Wayne Nichols' legal team was still fighting, not to stop the execution outright, but to understand exactly what it would involve. The fight in November 2025 was about transparency. It was about drugs. Earlier in 2025, in August, the state of Tennessee had carried out an execution. The inmate's name was Byron Black, and during the administration of the lethal injection, Byron Black spoke words that sent a chill through legal observers, death penalty advocates, and journalists who were present in that execution chamber. He said, "It hurts so bad." 3 words. And the Tennessee Department of Correction offered no explanation, no acknowledgement, no accounting of what drugs had been used, at what dosage, or whether the procedure had gone according to protocol. Those 3 words, "It hurts so bad," were the reason Harold Wayne Nichols' legal team went to court in Knox County, Tennessee in November 2025. They wanted access to the execution drug records. They wanted to know the expiration dates of the drugs the state intended to use on their client. They wanted to know what was in the inventory. They argued that the Tennessee Department of Correction had illegally withheld this information. A Knox County chancellor agreed to review the records. December 9th, 2025, Nashville, Tennessee. Governor Bill Lee released his decision on the clemency petition. After careful consideration of Harold Wayne Nichols' clemency request and comprehensive review of the case, I am maintaining the sentence handed down by the state of Tennessee. That was it. No elaboration, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the historic nature of the case or the arguments made by Nichols' legal team. The sentence handed down by the state of Tennessee in 1990 would be carried out in 2 days. On the same day that Governor Lee denied clemency, Harold Wayne Nichols was removed from his regular death row cell at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in Nashville and transferred to a room directly adjacent to the execution chamber. This is called Death Watch. Death Watch means 24-hour surveillance. It means a corrections officer stationed outside your door around the clock. It means your normal prison routine, the rhythms you have built over decades on death row, the small daily patterns that give structure to a life lived behind bars disappears. You are under constant observation. You are one corridor away from the room where your life will end. Harold Wayne Nichols was placed on death watch on December 9th, 2025. December 10th, 2025, Knox County, Tennessee. The Knox County Chancellor issued an order. The Tennessee Department of Correction was required to release the expiration dates of the lethal injection drugs. Just 1 day before the execution, the transparency Nichols' legal team had been fighting for was finally granted. On that same day, in Nashville, Tennessee, Karen Pulley's sister Lisette Monroe arrived with her family. They had traveled to Nashville to be present for what December 11th would bring. Lisette Monroe spoke to reporters outside and said, "We have spent 37 years reliving trauma every time this case resurfaces. We want the focus to remain on Karen, not on Harold Wayne Nichols, not on the legal arguments, not on the protocols or the petitions or the governors or the judges, on Karen, on the 20-year-old woman who went to Chattanooga State Community College and wanted to be a paralegal, on the woman who shared an apartment in the Brainerd community with 2 roommates and went to sleep on September 30th, 1988, trusting that her locked door was enough. That was who Lisette Monroe wanted the world to remember as December 11th approached. December 11th, 2025. Riverbend Maximum Security Institution, 7908 Cockrell Bend Boulevard, Nashville, Tennessee. The morning arrived gray and quiet, the way winter mornings in Tennessee often do. Inside Riverbend Maximum Security Institution, Harold Wayne Nichols had spent his final night in the room adjacent to the execution chamber. A spiritual advisor had been with him, praying with him, sitting with him through the last hours of his life. For a man who had spoken openly in his final years about faith and transformation, those hours of prayer were, by all accounts, genuine. Corrections officers came for him in the morning. He walked into the execution chamber. This was Tennessee's third execution of the year 2025, a state that had paused its execution program for years, through COVID delays, through protocol reviews, through legal challenges, was now carrying out sentences that had been waiting for resolution for decades. There was no ceremony to it, no announcement, just the quiet institutional efficiency of a process that had been prepared for, reviewed, challenged, and ultimately cleared. Harold Wayne Nichols was secured to the gurney. His spiritual advisor was present. On the other side of a glass partition in a separate room, separated from the execution chamber by a wall and a window, Karen Pulley's family sat and watched. Lisette Monroe, the woman who had told reporters the day before that 37 years of reliving trauma was enough, that the focus should remain on Karen. She was there. The family was there. At 10:39 in the morning, the lethal injection was administered. Harold Wayne Nichols looked toward those in the room and spoke his final words. To the people I harmed, I am sorry. To my family, know that I love you. I know where I am going. I am ready to go home. He closed his eyes. He died, calm, still, at peace with whatever he had made peace with in 37 years on death row. Karen Pulley was 20 years old when Harold Wayne Nichols took everything from her on September 30th, 1988. She did not get 37 years. She did not get a spiritual advisor. She did not get final words. She did not get the chance to close her eyes and decide she was ready. She got a bedroom floor in the Brainerd community of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and she got a roommate who came home the next morning and found her there. After the execution, a man named Davis, someone who had known Harold Wayne Nichols for over a decade through a prison men's group inside Riverbend, spoke to reporters outside the institution. Davis had watched Nichols change over the years. He had sat with him in group meetings, prayed with him, heard his confessions of remorse, watched what appeared to be a genuine spiritual transformation unfold over years and years of incarceration. And Davis said this: he committed horrible crimes, but killing to teach people not to kill just doesn't make sense. Whether you agree with Davis or not, and reasonable people have disagreed about the death penalty for as long as the death penalty has existed, those words represent something real. They represent the impossible moral weight that every execution carries, regardless of the crime, regardless of the sentence, regardless of how long the process took to reach its conclusion. Harold Wayne Nichols got 37 years to make peace with God, with his family, and with himself. Karen Pulley got one night, and the Pulley family spent 37 years waiting for 10:39 on a December morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Harold Wayne Nichols was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee on December 31st, 1960. He grew up in a church-affiliated orphanage where pain was the only consistent lesson. He graduated from Kirkman Technical High School in August of 1979. He enlisted in the United States Army in November 1981 and served at Fort Riley, Kansas. He came home in November 1983, got married, smiled at his neighbors, sat in a church pew, and built a life that looked, from every outside angle, like the life of a decent, ordinary man. And on the night of September 30th, 1988, he climbed through a bathroom window in the Brainerd community of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and he stole everything from a 20-year-old woman named Karen Pulley, who wanted nothing more than to help people find justice. On December 11th, 2025, 37 years, 2 months, and 11 days after that night, the state of Tennessee closed that chapter. But for Lisette Monroe and the Pulley family, some chapters do not have endings. They just have dates you learn to live around. If Karen Pulley's story stayed with you today, if you made it to the end of this case and you felt something, then you already know why this channel exists. Every week, we open the files on the cases the world almost forgot. We sit with the victims, the headlines reduced to footnotes. We give a voice to the people who deserved so much more than what they got. If that matters to you, subscribe right now. Hit that bell so you never miss a case. Every story we tell is for someone like Karen Pulley, someone who deserved better, someone whose name deserves to be remembered. And before you go, we want to hear from you. The district attorney who prosecuted Harold Wayne Nichols wanted him to receive life in prison. A judge overruled that agreement. 37 years later, Nichols was executed. Drop a comment below and tell us. Do you think justice was finally served that December morning in Nashville? Or was 37 years on death row just another way of making the Pulley family suffer? There is no wrong answer. We just want to hear yours. Karen Pulley deserved to be a paralegal. She deserved to help people navigate justice. She deserved a full life. This was the least we could do.